Welcome to The Explainer.
Have you ever wondered why the wealthy just seem to keep getting richer even when the economy completely tanks? Well, today we're breaking down Robert Kiyosaki's financial theories from his book, Second Chance. Kiyosaki is actually one of the few people who accurately predicted the 2008 financial crisis, and his core philosophy here is pretty fascinating. He says wealth isn't destroyed during a crisis, it's simply transferred. So to figure out how to position yourself today, he argues that we've got to look at how monetary history actually shapes modern wealth.
Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We're going to cover 4 main parts. 1. The history of fake money. 2. The end of true wealth. 3. The cash flow quadrant. And finally, 4. 5 rules for new wealth. Let's just dive right in.
All right, part 1, the history of fake money and how it helps predict the future.
Kiyosaki says if you want to predict the future, you literally have to examine the past first. He starts by demystifying this term you probably hear on the financial news all the time: quantitative easing. Basically, governments use this really complex, confusing label to disguise a super simple act: printing money. Think about it. If you or I got into financial trouble and just started printing money down in our basement, we'd be thrown in jail for counterfeiting. But when governments face a crisis or, need to fund a war, they do the exact same thing. They just slap a fancy name on it and flood the economy with brand new currency.
And here's the thing, printing money is definitely not a new trick. It's been used for centuries, and spoiler alert, it always ends badly. Tracing this currency debasement through time, the author looks way back to the Roman Empire. When they were faced with war, they'd melt down silver and gold coins, mix in cheaper metals, or they'd do this thing called coin clipping, literally shaving the edges off tax coins to melt down and create new ones. Fast forward to Germany's Weimar Republic, printing money to pay World War I reparations, which led to massive hyperinflation. And then we hit a huge paradigm shift in 1971. President Richard Nixon completely severed the US dollar's tie to the gold standard. Suddenly, the money supply wasn't tethered to physical gold reserves anymore. It was backed by absolutely nothing but a promise. That meant governments could just print as much as they wanted with zero tangible limit.
To make the absolute disaster of hyperinflation feel real, the book paints this incredibly striking picture. Imagine going to a pub in the summer of 1923 in Germany. Instead of ordering one beer, drinking it, and then grabbing another, citizens literally had to order 2 beers at once. Why? Because even though that second beer is going to get totally warm, the cash in their pocket was losing its value so unbelievably fast that by the time they finished their first drink, they literally couldn't afford the second one. I mean, that is the terrifying, everyday reality of hyperinflation.
So the Romans did it, the Germans did it, Zimbabwe did it, and yeah, modern nations are doing it right now. Like Albert Einstein famously said, insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over and expecting different results. Yet, governments just keep up this cycle of creating currency out of thin air, seemingly refusing to learn from centuries of history. And what that means for us is that it's entirely up to you and me to protect ourselves.
Which brings us to Section 2, the end of true wealth and the real-world fallout of all this. So, what does this actually mean for the average person today? Well, here's a truly staggering consequence of unbacked fiat currency. Get this, since 1913, the US dollar has lost an incredible 95% of its purchasing power. 95%! Every single time money is printed, it actively dilutes the value of the cash sitting right there in your bank account. Kiyosaki points out that this basically acts as an invisible tax. It systematically siphons wealth away from the poor and the middle class straight up to the ultra-rich, because the rich hold assets, not cash.
And you're probably feeling this modern fallout right now. The middle class is shrinking fast. Food stamp usage is at alarming highs because everyday wages just can't keep up with basic living costs. Plus, we're all seeing shrinkflation at the grocery store. It's essentially modern-day Roman coin clipping. The price of your favorite cereals stays the exact same, but the box gets noticeably smaller. Meanwhile, with all this printed money flooding the system, your savings account is probably earning a measly 1 or 2% interest, which doesn't even come close to keeping up with inflation.
Given these pretty stark facts, the author challenges us to take a step back and objectively question the whole system. He argues that what we're experiencing is actually an educational crisis. We're all taught to, work hard, save your pennies, invest for the long term. But does that traditional advice make any logical sense anymore in a system built to benefit Wall Street? Why work harder just to pay more taxes for money that is actively losing its value? And really, why save money when the government is actively printing it?
Let's move on to Section 3, the cash flow quadrant and how wealth is actually structured.
To navigate this whole changing landscape and stop playing a game you're destined to lose, Kiyosaki introduces the cash flow quadrant.
This visually breaks down two totally different approaches to the economy. Over on the left side, you've got employees and the self-employed. Now, when financial crises hit, the people on this left side absolutely suffer the most, because they are directly trading their limited time for depreciating fiat currency. But look at the right side. Here you have business owners and investors. People on this side don't work for money at all. Instead, they focus all their energy and leverage on acquiring wealth-generating assets. The massive takeaway here is that true, lasting wealth exists almost exclusively on this right side of the quadrant.
So to successfully make that transition over to the right side, the book outlines 4 major asset classes you can go after. First, building a business. It's the hardest path, for sure, but ultimately the most profitable. Then there's real estate. This one is moderate in difficulty, and it's actually Kiyosaki's personal favorite for producing reliable monthly cash flow. Third, commodities. These offer hard, tangible value, especially during times of high inflation. And finally, paper assets, things like stocks and bonds. Now, these are definitely the easiest to acquire, but Kiyosaki gives a huge warning here. He argues the modern stock market has essentially become a rigged casino. It's so heavily manipulated by complex fees and institutional advantages that the house almost always wins, usually at the expense of the average everyday investor.
All right, Section 4, 5 rules for new wealth, and how we actually adapt for success.
So how do you actually start making this transition? Well, the author prescribes 5 specific, actionable rules. Rule number 1 is all about taking active control of your financial education, specifically through simulation. Think about it. We usually only remember about 10% of what we read or listen to. But when you learn by doing, like actively playing financial simulation games, your retention skyrockets to an amazing 90%. He really urges you to practice in a risk-free, simulated environment. Let those complex financial concepts sink in completely before you ever put real money on the line in the real world.
Moving to Rule 2. This one takes a deeply contrarian view on job security. Most of us are completely hardwired to think that a secure job with a steady paycheck is the absolute safest route you can take. But let's think about that for a second. An employee actually only has one single client, their employer. If you lose that one client, your income drops to 0 instantly. That is incredibly high risk. An entrepreneur, on the other hand, has dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of clients, which massively diversifies their risk. And on top of that, tax codes and corporate laws are structurally written to favor entrepreneurs simply because they're the ones out there creating jobs and stimulating the economy.
Rule 3 is a total departure from what traditional financial planners will tell you. You know how they're always saying to cut out small joys, like your daily lattes, just to save a few pennies? Kiyosaki completely rejects that. He calls that restrictive mindset a literal passion killer. Instead of living below your means and just shrinking your life down, his third rule tells you to expand your means. Don't kill your passion. Instead, challenge your brain. Ask yourself, how can I afford it? Force yourself to find creative ways to expand your income so you can effortlessly afford the things you truly love without ever feeling deprived.
Fourth, Kiyosaki completely redefines the whole concept of debt. Since modern money isn't backed by gold anymore, it's essentially created out of debt. So when people tell you to get out of debt, they are practically telling you to get out of money. Because of this, the wealthy learn to use what he calls good debt. Good debt is leverage. You use it to purchase assets like a rental property that literally put cash directly into your pocket every single month, essentially paying off the loan for you. Bad debt, on the other hand, is using credit to buy liabilities, things that just drain your wealth and lose value over time, like a brand new TV, a luxury car, or some expensive vacation.
His final piece of advice, Rule 5, is to embrace failure as a totally natural, absolutely unavoidable step in the wealth-building process. Look, our traditional school system heavily penalizes mistakes, right? It teaches us that failing is just inherently bad. But in the real world, you literally cannot succeed without stumbling first. He makes this brilliant comparison between early business mistakes and learning how to ride a bicycle. You had to fall off, scrape your knee a few times, and get back on before you finally found your balance, right? Financial education is no different. It requires practice, it requires patience, and it absolutely requires resilience.
And that brings us to the end of Kiyosaki's insights. So I want you to take a hard look at your own portfolio tonight. Given this historical perspective of just endless money printing and currency debasement, ask yourself, are you building your financial future on shifting sand, or are you ready to adapt, embrace real financial education, and build true wealth on a solid foundation? The rules of money have fundamentally changed. The only question is, are you going to change with them?